Good evening and welcome to Sleep Sanctuary, where calmness and imagination meet to guide you into a restful sleep. Close your eyes if you'd like and take a deep breath. Let the weight of the day melt away as you settle into this moment. Tonight, I want to take you on a journey of a quiet, reflective one beneath the vast, shimmering sky. Imagine the crisp chill of a winter night, the kind that fills the air with a clean, invigorating stillness. Let the world outside fade, and join me as we step into a story where the heavens themselves speak. Tonight, I'll share with you a moment I'll never forget. It was a night unlike any other, beneath the northern lights. The aurora danced across the sky like ribbons of green, purple, and gold, weaving their magic high above the frozen earth. I was alone, standing on a snowy ridge far from the noise and glow of city lights. There, surrounded by silence, the world felt timeless, as if I'd stepped into something eternal. I had always been drawn to the northern lights. There's something about them, how they move and shimmer, as though they're alive. But that night, they felt different. It wasn't just their beauty that captivated me, it was something deeper. As I stood there, gazing upward, it felt as though the lights were whispering, telling stories hidden in their glow. At first, I thought it was just my imagination. After all, I was miles away from anyone, the cold air sharp against my skin, the snow crunching softly under my boots. But the longer I stood there, the more I felt it, a connection, a pull from the universe itself. It was as if the lights were alive, carrying with them voices from the past, echoes of courage, kindness, and hope. And then, one of those stories began to stand out. It wasn't just any story, it was my story, though I didn't realize it at first. It reached into a place I had long forgotten, stirring something within me that I hadn't felt in years. So tonight, I'll share that story with you. It's a story about the quiet power of connection and the profound impact even the smallest acts of kindness can have. But for now, let's just take this moment to breathe, to listen, and to let the magic of the northern lights guide us. Before we continue, let's take a moment to leave the day behind and embrace the calm of this journey. Close your eyes if you haven't already, and settle into a comfortable position. Allow yourself to feel fully present in this moment, where nothing is required of you but to simply be. Take a deep breath in through your nose, filling your lungs with fresh, cool air. Hold it gently for a moment, then release it slowly, letting go of any tension. Let's do that again. Inhale deeply, feeling the air fill your chest and belly. Hold it, and exhale, letting a wave of calm wash over you. Picture yourself standing in a vast, open field blanketed with freshly fallen snow. The air is crisp but not cold, and the sky above you shimmers with hues of green and gold, ribbons of light gently weaving across the heavens. The snow beneath your feet feels soft, cushioning you as if the earth itself is holding you in its embrace. Now, imagine a gentle breeze brushing against your skin. It carries with it a faint hum, a sound so soft it feels more like a memory than a noise. It whispers of peace, of stillness, and of the beauty of simply being here, now, in this quiet moment. Let the tension in your shoulders melt away, feeling them sink gently as if the breeze has carried the weight from them. Let your hands relax, your jaw unclench, and your thoughts grow softer, like snowflakes drifting down to rest. Stay here for a moment, surrounded by calm, as the lights above guide you into a deeper state of ease. And when you're ready, we'll begin again, stepping further into the story the Northern Lights wish to tell. As I stood beneath the vast expanse of the Northern Lights, I began to notice something extraordinary. It wasn't just the colors that captivated me, the way they moved in shimmering waves, painting the sky with greens and purples. It was something deeper, something I couldn't quite explain at first. The lights seemed alive, like they were trying to communicate. At first, it was subtle. The soft rustling of the wind through the snow-covered trees blended with a low, ethereal hum that seemed to rise and fall with the movement of the aurora. I thought it was my mind playing tricks on me. After all, I was standing alone in the stillness of the night, surrounded by nothing but nature. Yet the feeling grew stronger. The lights danced in patterns I couldn't look away from. They twisted and twirled like ribbons, creating shapes that felt familiar yet just out of reach. And then I heard it, a whisper. It wasn't a voice, not exactly, but it was unmistakably there. A soft murmur carried on the air, like fragments of a forgotten story. As I focused on the sounds, the whispers began to coalesce into something more vivid. They weren't just sounds, they were moments, memories. I could see them, like faint echoes reflected in the sky above. A woman kneeling in the snow, offering her coat to a stranger who had nothing. A child reaching out to comfort a crying friend. A man standing tall, shielding another from harm. These were stories of courage, of kindness, of love. Each scene flickered for just a moment before blending back into the light, yet they left a deep impression. I realized the lights weren't just a spectacle, they were a window into something timeless, carrying stories of humanity across the fabric of the universe. I watched, mesmerized, as one act of kindness after another unfolded in the sky. They weren't grand gestures. They were small moments, moments most of us might dismiss as insignificant. A shared meal, a comforting touch, a helping hand. Yet, as the lights revealed, these small acts rippled outward, touching lives in ways the original giver might never know. And then, as the lights continued to whisper their stories, one scene stood out from the rest. It was subtle at first, a snowy street, a figure bending down to help someone. But something about it felt familiar. The longer I watched, the more it tugged at me. I could feel a memory stirring, though I couldn't yet place it. The light seemed to linger on that story, as if urging me to look closer. My heart began to race. What was it about this scene that felt so personal? Why did it feel like I was not just watching, but remembering? I stayed there, frozen in place, staring at the sky as the whispers grew softer but more insistent. The lights had awakened something within me, a connection, a truth I hadn't yet uncovered. I knew then that the story they were telling wasn't just any story. It was mine. The longer I stood beneath the northern lights, the more the memory stirred. The scene above me, faint and flickering, showed a snow-covered street. A figure bent down, helping someone who had fallen, their breath visible in the icy air. The light in the sky seemed to pulse gently, as if it were waiting for me to remember. And then it hit me. It was years ago, during a particularly brutal winter. I had been walking home from work, head down, lost in my own thoughts. The snow was relentless that night, blanketing the streets and muffling the usual sounds of the city. That was when I noticed an older man struggling to cross the road. He was carrying a heavy bag, his steps slow and unsteady. At first, I hesitated. I was cold, tired, and eager to get home. But something stopped me, a small voice in the back of my mind urging me to act. So I walked over, asked if he needed help, and offered to carry his bag. He was grateful, but reluctant at first, insisting he could manage. Still, I walked beside him, taking the weight of the bag as we moved toward his destination. It turned out he lived just a few blocks away, in a modest apartment tucked above a bakery. He thanked me quietly as we reached his door, his face weary but kind. I didn't think much of it at the time. It was just a small moment, something anyone might do. I'd forgotten about it almost as soon as it happened, until now. As the memory came flooding back, the northern lights seemed to respond, glowing brighter and swirling with renewed intensity. It was as if they were showing me something I hadn't seen before. In the light's ethereal glow, I saw what happened after I left that night. The older man unpacked his bag, a simple meal he had scraped together for his sick wife, who was resting in the apartment. The relief on his face as he placed the food on the table was palpable. It wasn't just about the bag I had carried, it was the help he needed in a moment of quiet desperation. And then the scene shifted. I saw the man again, months later, sitting with a neighbor, a young mother struggling to make ends meet. He was sharing advice, lending support, offering her the kindness that had once been extended to him. My simple act had set something in motion, a ripple that touched lives in ways I could never have imagined. Tears welled in my eyes as I stood beneath the sky, the lights painting the memory vividly before me. I hadn't realized how much a single moment could matter. What had felt like a passing act of decency was, to someone else, a lifeline. The northern lights pulse softly now, their whispers quieter, almost comforting. They had shown me my own story, not just as I had lived it, but as it had resonated far beyond what I could see. A forgotten act of kindness, now illuminated in a way that made me see its true worth. The memory felt so vivid now, as though the northern lights had reached into the depths of my mind and pulled it out, dusting it off for me to see clearly. What I had dismissed as an ordinary moment, long buried beneath the years, was now illuminated in its full significance. I could see myself that snowy evening, trudging through the streets with no particular urgency. The old man had caught my eye, and not because he was extraordinary, but because he looked so alone. His movements were slow, his shoulders bent beneath the weight of the bag he carried. The wind howled around us, cutting through the layers of clothing we both wore. When I approached him, I didn't think much of it. "Can I help you with that?" I had asked, not expecting him to accept. For a moment, he hesitated, his pride flashing in his tired eyes. Then he nodded, and I took the bag from his hands. It had been heavier than I expected. Cans of soup, a loaf of bread, some medicine. I remembered now how he had muttered something about his wife, how she wasn't feeling well, and how she always worried about him going out in the cold. He had smiled weakly as we walked, the kind of smile people wear when they're trying to hide how much they're struggling. I'd walked him to his building, climbed the narrow staircase with him, and left the bag just inside his apartment. I remembered the faint smell of freshly baked bread wafting from the bakery below. He had thanked me quietly, almost embarrassed by the help, and I had waved it off, saying, "Take care." And that was it. I had gone on with my life, thinking nothing more of the interaction. To me, it had been a fleeting moment, insignificant in the grand scheme of things. But as the northern lights shimmered above me, I saw how that moment had blossomed into something far greater. Through the lights, I glimpsed the man's life after that night. I saw him sitting by his wife's bedside, offering her the meal he had gathered with such effort. Her gratitude and relief were evident, her hands trembling as she held the bowl of soup. I saw the quiet strength in his actions, the way he cared for her with unwavering devotion. But it didn't end there. The light showed me how he had carried that kindness forward. Months later, he had helped a young mother in his building, giving her advice and offering her small gifts to ease her burden. The kindness I had shown him became the foundation for kindness he shared with others. The ripple of that single act grew wider and wider. It connected people I would never meet, lives I could never have imagined touching. And all of it started with a moment I had nearly forgotten. The light seemed to hum softly now, as if reminding me of the power we all hold, the ability to change the world, even in the smallest ways. The air around me felt different now. The northern lights still danced above, their colors weaving in and out of one another like a symphony of light, but their whispers had grown softer. I stood there, beneath that vast, shimmering sky, with a newfound awareness. The story they had shown me wasn't just about me, it was about all of us. That single act of kindness, something I had dismissed as fleeting and ordinary, had been anything but. It was a thread in a larger tapestry, a small but vital strand that connected me to others in ways I had never imagined. For the first time in a long while, I felt truly connected to the world, to the people in it, and to something even greater than myself. The northern lights seemed to be telling me a truth that I had overlooked for most of my life, that we are never as separate as we think we are. I thought about the man I had helped, about how he had passed on the kindness he received. I thought about the young mother he had supported, and how she might have gone on to touch someone else's life in turn. These moments, small, quiet, and often unnoticed, were like sparks in the darkness. Each one added to a greater light, spreading far beyond what any of us could see. The northern lights swirled gently, their hues shifting to softer greens and golds. They seemed to echo what I was feeling, a sense of humility and awe. I realized how easy it is to forget the impact we have on one another. How often we underestimate the power of a kind word, a helping hand, or even a simple smile. I thought back to moments in my own life when someone had been kind to me. A teacher who stayed late to help me understand a lesson I was struggling with. A friend who called just when I needed someone to talk to. A stranger who held open a door when my hands were full. None of those people knew how much their actions meant to me, just as I hadn't known what my small gesture had meant to the man that snowy night. I looked up at the lights, feeling a quiet determination settle within me. If such a small act could create such ripples, then perhaps the way forward wasn't so complicated after all. Maybe it wasn't about grand gestures or extraordinary achievements. Maybe it was about the simple, everyday moments of connection that we so often overlook. The northern lights seemed to pulse softly, almost as if they were agreeing. I stood there for a long time, letting the thoughts settle within me. When I finally turned to leave, I carried with me a profound sense of purpose. I couldn't change the past, and I couldn't control the future, but I could choose how I moved through the world. I could choose to be present, to be kind, and to embrace the quiet, beautiful connections that bind us all together. As I left the field where the northern lights painted their stories, I felt different. There was a lightness in my steps that hadn't been there before, as though the weight of something invisible had been lifted. The hum of the lights still resonated in my chest, faint but steady, like a quiet reassurance that their message was now part of me. The night was still and silent, the snow crunching softly beneath my boots. My breath clouded in the cold air, but instead of feeling the sharp chill, I noticed the way the frost sparkled in the moonlight, each flake catching the faint glow like a tiny star. For the first time in what felt like years, I saw beauty in the small details around me. I thought back to the story the lights had shared with me, the threads of kindness and courage that connected strangers across time. A sense of warmth spread through me, despite the cold. If such small, ordinary actions could ripple outward and touch so many lives, then perhaps the world wasn't as fragile or disconnected as it sometimes seemed. Hope wasn't something I had allowed myself to feel in a long time. Life had a way of wearing it down, of making you focus on the things that didn't go right, the mistakes, the struggles, the disappointments. But tonight, under the watchful glow of the northern lights, I saw something different. I saw how even the smallest acts of goodness could shine in the darkest moments. I thought of my own life, of all the times I had hesitated to act because I thought my efforts wouldn't matter. I had convinced myself that one person couldn't make a difference, that the problems of the world were too vast, too overwhelming. But the lights had shown me otherwise. They had reminded me that change starts in the smallest of moments, in the quiet decisions we make every day to show up, to help, to care. The memory of that snowy night so many years ago no longer felt like a distant fragment of my past. It felt alive, its impact still unfolding, even now. And if that single act of kindness had mattered, then so could the choices I made tomorrow, and the day after that. I found myself smiling as I walked. The path ahead was still uncertain, and the challenges of life hadn't disappeared, but something had shifted within me. I no longer felt powerless against the tides of the world. Instead, I felt part of something larger, a web of connection that stretched far beyond what I could see. The northern lights were fading now, their colors softening into the dark sky. But their presence lingered in my heart, a quiet reminder of the strength and beauty in small, human moments. Hope didn't have to be grand or fleeting, I realized. Sometimes it was as simple as believing that what we do matters, and that, in itself, was enough to keep moving forward. The northern lights began to dim as the first light of dawn crept over the horizon. Their vibrant greens and purples softened into pale wisps, retreating into the dark sky like the final notes of a symphony fading into silence. The stillness that followed wasn't empty, though it felt full, like the world was holding its breath in quiet reverence. I stood there for a moment longer, watching as the last glimmers disappeared, leaving behind the faint glow of stars. The whispers had gone quiet, but their echoes lingered within me. The lights had faded, yes, but the stories they had shared were still alive, woven into the fabric of my thoughts and my heart. As I turned to leave, I realized how much had shifted within me during the night. When I had first arrived here, I was seeking something I couldn't name, an answer, perhaps, or simply a reprieve from the noise of my own mind. What I had found instead was a gift far greater than I had imagined. the lights had shown me the power of connection. They had revealed that even the smallest acts of kindness, courage, and love could ripple outward in ways I might never see. They had reminded me that I was part of something much larger than myself, a vast and intricate web of humanity, where every thread mattered. As I walked back toward the edge of the forest, the first rays of sunlight broke through the trees, casting long shadows across the snow. The world was waking up, ordinary and unchanged in appearance, yet it felt different to me. The mundane details of life now seemed infused with meaning. I thought about the man I had helped that snowy night so many years ago and how his life had intertwined with others. I wondered about the ripples of kindness in my own life, the moments where someone had extended a hand to me, or when I had unknowingly done the same for someone else. Those moments didn't require recognition or reward. They simply existed, quiet but profound, shaping the world in their own subtle ways. The lights had taught me that the stories we create through our actions don't disappear. Even when the lights fade, the stories remain, carried forward in the lives we touch, in the echoes of our choices. As I reached the edge of the forest, I paused to take one last look at the sky. The northern lights were gone, but the sense of connection and hope they had given me lingered like a steady flame. I felt ready to face the world again, not with grand plans or sweeping gestures, but with a simple, quiet determination to move through life with kindness and purpose. The lights may have spoken their final word for now, but I knew their message would stay with me. The stories they had shown me, and the ones I would help create, were part of something eternal. Even in their fading, the lights had left a mark, a reminder that, no matter how small, every act of goodness matters.